Back in 2006, I worked part-time at a little mom-and-pop video rental place called Maplewood Video. It sat at the edge of town, nestled between a dry cleaner and a shuttered Radio Shack. It was the kind of place where the carpets always smelled faintly like popcorn butter and plastic, and the employees wore faded maroon polos with staff stitched crookedly over the chest. Streaming hadn't fully killed us yet, but we were bleeding out slowly. The regulars, mostly older folks and the occasional couple on a nostalgia kick, kept the lights on. That was fine by me. I was 19, just out of high school, and I liked the quiet. I could shelve tapes, tidy up, and lose myself in the monotony without much hassle. We had this old metal return slot on the side of the building, one of those little flaps with a heavy hinge. People would drop tapes in there after hours, and I'd process them the next day. Usually, I'd just find the usual stuff: Forrest Gump, The Exorcist, The Godfather, a parade of familiar plastic clamshells. But then, about mid-October, something changed. It was a Tuesday morning. The sky was gray and flat, and the parking lot was still slick from rain. I unlocked the front door, disarmed the alarm, and started my usual routine: lights on, register booted, coffee going. Then I walked to the back room to empty the return bin. That's when I found the first one. It wasn't a regular case. It was a black unmarked VHS tape. No label, no sticker, not even a handwritten title. Just matte black plastic, scuffed along the sides like it had been handled a lot. I turned it over. Someone had peeled the safety tab off, meaning it couldn't be recorded over. I assumed it was just someone's home movie, maybe accidentally dropped in. It happens sometimes. I logged it in under Lost and Found, and put it aside. Then I found another one the next day. Same deal. No label, just a worn black tape. At first, I thought maybe someone was playing a prank. A bored teenager with access to a few old blank tapes. But something about them gave me a weird feeling. Not fear, exactly, just a kind of unease. Like the way a room feels after someone was just arguing in it, even after they've left. By the fifth day, I stopped thinking it was a coincidence. Each morning, a new tape. No case, no note, no explanation. Just that same anonymous, battered look. Always one. Always waiting. So I decided I'd watch one. Not out front, of course. I waited until my shift ended and the store was closed. I locked the doors, turned the lights low, and wheeled the old CRT TV on its cart out from the storage room. It had a built-in VCR. Still worked, even if the picture was grainy and sometimes flickered. I picked the first tape, the original one I'd found, and popped it in. For the first 30 seconds, it was just static. Then, abruptly, the screen cleared, and I saw what looked like security footage. Black and white, wide-angle lens. A small room. Maybe a basement. There was a single wooden chair in the center. Empty. The camera didn't move. There was no sound. Just a faint hum of the tape itself. After maybe 2 minutes, something entered the frame. I thought it was a person at first. But it didn't move right. It came into frame slowly, walking, or maybe sliding, toward the chair. The footage was low quality, but I could still make out a shape, tall, lanky, vaguely human. The limbs were wrong, though. Too long at the joints, like someone had pulled a mannequin's arms out of socket and popped them back in crooked. Its head hung at an angle, tilted slightly to one side like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. It didn't look at the camera. It just moved straight to the chair and sat down. That was it. The thing sat there, perfectly still, for the next 10 minutes of tape. No movement. No noise. Just that hunched figure, like it was waiting. The longer I watched, the more uncomfortable I got. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like I wasn't just watching the tape, like I was being watched back. Eventually, the screen cut to static again, and the tape ended. I sat there for a while in the dark, listening to the low whir of the machine as it reached the end and clicked. I should have felt relieved that it was over, but instead I just felt unsettled. Like that silence had soaked into the room. I ejected the tape and slid it back into its plastic shell, heart ticking just a little too fast. That night, I didn't sleep much. The next morning, another tape was waiting in the return slot. Same unmarked black casing. That made 6. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trying to send something. A message. Or a warning. I thought about calling my manager, Tim, but what was I going to say? Hey, someone's leaving creepy tapes in the drop box and I'm scared of one that shows a guy with noodle limbs sitting in a chair. I kept my mouth shut. But I stopped watching them. I stored the tapes in a box beneath the counter and tried to focus on the day-to-day. Scan returns, wiped cases, organized shelves. Normal stuff. But I noticed something strange that week, something I didn't connect at first. People stopped coming in. No regulars. No couples. No weird dudes asking if we had faces of death in the back. The store was just dead. At first I blamed the rain, or bad luck. But by Friday, I'd gone 2 whole shifts without seeing a single customer. I called Tim again. No answer. Just voicemail. I left a message and locked up early. That night I had a dream. I was inside the store, but it wasn't quite right. The shelves were all empty, and the windows were covered with sheets of black paper. The lights flickered overhead, and the return slot was rattling like someone was banging on it from the outside. Then I heard a click behind me. I turned, and that thing from the tape was sitting on the front counter, just watching me. Head cocked. Eyes like smeared charcoal. It didn't move. It didn't speak. But it knew me. I woke up with a jolt, soaked in sweat, heart jackhammering in my chest. I didn't go back to sleep. Instead, I went to the store early. Before opening, I needed to check the return bin. There was no tape that morning. Just a note. It was written on the back of a faded Jurassic Park rental sleeve, torn at the corners. Just 3 words, in all caps, black sharp. Do not watch. That note stayed in my hand for a long time. I must have read it 20 times before I moved again. My first thought was that someone was messing with me, some bored ex-employee or film student with a flair for horror. But this wasn't funny. It wasn't even trying to be. There was no smiley face, no signature. Just, do not watch, in angry, permanent strokes. Whoever wrote it had pressed hard enough that the ink bled through to the other side of the paper. I checked the return bin again, hoping I missed something. Nothing. No tape this time. For the first time since I started working there, I left the store unlocked and walked around to the alley by the return slot. The metal flap was still intact. No signs of tampering. Just that faint smell of wet cardboard and old plastic. Back inside, I tucked the note under the register and spent the morning watching the front door. Nobody came in. Again. By noon, I gave up pretending to do inventory and dragged the box of tapes from under the counter. I needed to do something. I lined them up on the floor, all 7 of them now, in the order I'd received them. The one I'd watched was still first. The others were untouched. No markings, no numbers, nothing to differentiate them. Except, now that I was looking closely, I noticed something new. The 6th tape felt warm. I don't mean it was room temperature. I mean it felt like someone had just pulled it out of a VCR. I hadn't touched it since I got it 2 days earlier, and it had been sitting with the others in the same cardboard box. But this one? The plastic was faintly warm, and when I held it to my ear, I could have sworn I heard something faint. A clicking sound, like static caught on a loop. I dropped it. My hands were shaking. My heart was thudding in my ears. I was starting to feel like I was losing my grip on reality, but I wasn't ready to admit it yet. I stacked the tapes back in the box and shoved them under the counter like stuffing a body under a bed. That night, I told myself I'd sleep. Instead, I stayed up drinking old instant coffee and watching the parking lot from my apartment window. Sometime after 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text. No number. Just blank, like the sender had been scrubbed out. It said, "You watched one." My mouth went dry. I tried calling back. Nothing. Dead line. I went through my call history, my text logs. There was nothing there. No message saved. No sign anything had come through. I told myself I imagined it. A dream. A glitch. Anything but real. But the next morning, I got to the store and found the back door was unlocked. I knew I had locked it. Triple-checked it, like I always did. Inside, nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. But the box of tapes was open. And the sixth tape was gone. The box hadn't been moved. It was still pushed up against the wall under the counter. But there was this weird disturbance, like someone had reached in carefully, purposefully. The other tapes were still lined up neatly. Only the sixth one was missing. I checked the doors again. Front, locked. Back, unlocked. No sign of a break-in. Nothing on the cameras either. The grainy security system we had only recorded when there was movement, and the time-stamped logs showed no motion between midnight and 6 a.m. But that door had been open. And that tape was gone. I didn't call the cops. What was I gonna say? Hello, I think someone broke in and stole one unmarked VHS tape that might be haunted. So I did the next dumbest thing. I decided to watch another tape. I picked the second one. The one I'd gotten the day after the first. Part of me wanted to believe I'd hallucinated the other footage, or that it had been some weird performance art. Maybe the new one would show a wedding, or someone's kid riding a bike. Something to shake this awful, sticky feeling of being watched. I rolled out the CRT TV again, slid the tape in, and sat down in the dark with a warm soda from the back fridge. My palms were sweating. I felt like I was doing something wrong, like opening a stranger's mail or stealing from a grave. This one started immediately. Same grainy quality. Black and white again. This time, it was a long hallway. Cement walls. No windows. Bare bulb at the end, flickering like it was struggling to stay on. For a long time, nothing happened. Then something moved just at the very edge of the frame. I leaned in, squinting. It was hard to tell, but I think it was the same figure from the first tape. Tall. Lopsided. Moving like it didn't quite understand how joints were supposed to work. It never came into full view. Instead, it paced back and forth just outside the camera's reach. Like it knew where the edge of the lens was. Like it was trying to stay hidden. But I could see enough to know it was waiting for something. Or someone. Then, just for a split second, it turned toward the camera. I don't know how to explain this part. It felt like it saw me. Not in a metaphorical sense. I mean, I felt a physical jolt. Like someone had called my name in a dead silent room. My ears rang, my stomach dropped. The figure didn't have a face, not really. But its head shifted just enough, and I could swear those blurred sockets locked on me. Then the screen cut to black. But it didn't go to static. Instead, a sentence faded in, typed in blinking white letters. He who watches is watched. Then the tape ended. I didn't move for a full minute. Just sat there with that hum of dead air coming from the VCR. Then something clattered outside. I jumped up and ran to the front window. Nothing there. The parking lot was empty, the street quiet. But when I came back behind the counter, my skin prickled. Because sitting right next to the unplugged TV was the sixth tape. The one that had gone missing. And now, scrawled into its plastic shell, carved, not written, was a date. October 31st. I just stared at it. That black tape, sitting there like it had always been there. The scratched-in date, October 31st, looked fresh. Little bits of black plastic curled at the edges of the carved numbers. It hadn't been marked when I first cataloged it. I was sure of that. Someone, something, had brought it back. I didn't touch it. I didn't even want to be near it. I wrapped it in a plastic grocery bag, shoved it under the counter again, and locked the cabinet. Not that a lock was going to stop whatever the hell was happening. For the rest of the day, I waited for something. A knock. A visitor. A phone call. Anything. But the store stayed empty. The streets were quiet. I didn't even see a single car pass in front of the windows. It was like the whole world was slowly peeling itself away from me. When I finally locked up that night, I looked back through the glass one last time before getting into my car. The tapes were still there, under the counter. The return slot was shut. Everything looked normal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. That night I crashed hard. Exhaustion finally won out. But even in sleep, I didn't get peace. I dreamed I was in the store again, only it wasn't really the store. It was reversed somehow. The aisles went in the wrong direction. The cases had no covers, just black, identical spines. And the lights were off. Only the blue glow of the TV behind the counter lit the place. On the screen, the hallway played on a loop. The figure paced at the edge of the frame, back and forth. Back and forth. I moved closer to the screen in the dream. Closer. And just as I reached for the power button, its hand shot out of the TV. Not like some cartoon jump scare. I mean, it extended smoothly, arms sliding through the glass like it wasn't even there. Its fingers touched my chest. And I woke up gasping. It was 3:33 a.m. My apartment was dark, quiet. But the TV was on. Static hissed in the corner of the room. I hadn't touched the remote. I hadn't turned it on. But there it was, white snow, loud and humming. I unplugged it. Didn't sleep after that. The next day, October 30th, I made a decision. I was going to get rid of the tapes. All of them. I didn't care who had dropped them off, or what message they were trying to send. I was done being the audience. So I packed the tapes in a box, taped it shut, and drove out to the dump on the edge of town. The place was surrounded by rusted-out fencing and rows of heaped metal. A guy in a green vest waved me in. Didn't ask what I was tossing. I climbed out of my car, walked to the edge of a pit, and threw the box in. Watched it land with a hollow clatter. I waited, just to be sure. Nothing happened. No explosion, no ghost, no long-limbed figure crawling up the hill. Just silence. I drove home and told myself it was over. That I'd done the right thing. That it was all finally going to stop. And for the rest of the day, it seemed like it had. Until I got to the store the next morning, Halloween, and saw the door wide open. Inside, the lights were off. The power was dead. And sitting on the counter, lit only by the early gray light from the window, was a single black VHS tape. The sixth one. Still warm. Still humming. And this time, there was a label. Play me. Midnight. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just staring at that tape. The store was freezing. Not cold like the AC was too high, cold like the inside of a freezer. The kind of cold that sinks into your bones and makes your teeth want to chatter. I could see my breath, which made no sense. The thermostat said 68. But the cold wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the silence. The entire store felt muffled, like the air itself was holding its breath. No humming from the fluorescents. No ticking from the wall clock. No distant street sounds. Just this unnatural, pressing quiet. The tapes sat on the counter, waiting. I should have left. I should have walked right back out, gotten in my car, and never looked back. But I didn't. Instead, I locked the front door behind me. I don't even know why I did it. Habit, maybe. Maybe I thought locking it would make it feel safer. It didn't. The CRT was still in the back room. I wheeled it out and plugged it in. I didn't even try to explain to myself why. I knew I wasn't going to wait until midnight. Whatever was going to happen, I wanted it over. I popped the tape in. But this time, I didn't sit down. The screen stayed black for a long time. Then the white text appeared again, but this time it said, "You shouldn't have watched." That's when I heard the knocking. Not on the front door. From inside the store. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I spun around, heart thudding in my throat. Nothing there. The aisles were empty. The store was still cloaked in that unnatural silence. But the knocking continued. Knock. 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 It was coming from the return slot. I walked toward it, each step slower than the last. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. Every instinct I had was screaming to run. But I kept walking. When I reached the return box, the knocking stopped. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without fully meaning to, I lifted the flap and looked inside. There was no tape. Just a scrap of paper. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. It said, "You're in the tape now." That's when the power cut out. Total blackout. I was plunged into darkness so complete it felt physical. I could hear the CRT clicking as it powered down, the static fading to nothing. And then, I saw a shape in the aisle. Just barely outlined in the ambient light from the window. Tall. Bent. Watching me. Its head tilted. And I swear to you, I swear on everything, I could feel its eyes on me. No movement. Just the two of us, staring across the store. Then the silence broke. From behind the counter, the VCR clicked. The tape was ejecting. Even though there was no power. Even though the screen was dead. It clicked once, twice, and then the tape slid back out onto the tray. Still warm. Still humming. I stepped back. The figure in the aisle was gone. But something told me, deep in my gut, that it hadn't left. It had just changed position. It was behind me. I didn't turn around. I ran. I didn't even lock the door behind me. I just ran. Into the cold morning air, down the empty sidewalk, out past the flickering street lamps until my lungs burned and my legs ached. I don't remember getting into my car. I just remember the engine roaring to life and the tires screeching as I peeled out of the lot like something was actually chasing me. And maybe it was. I didn't go home. I drove around for hours, just laps around the edge of town, past dark storefronts and silent houses with plastic skeletons still hanging in the windows for Halloween. Eventually, I pulled into a 24-hour diner. The kind with yellow lighting and cracked vinyl booths. I must have looked like hell. The waitress didn't say a word, just poured me coffee and left the pot. I didn't drink it. I just sat there until the sun came up. I went home that afternoon. Closed all my blinds. Turned on every light in the apartment. Slept on the couch with the TV on and a baseball bat across my lap. But nothing happened. And that was somehow worse. Because I knew it was waiting. And the longer nothing happened, the more I realized the truth. This wasn't about the tape. It wasn't about the store. It was about me. I had watched the tape. I had seen the thing inside it. And whatever it was, it had seen me back. That wasn't something I could undo. I couldn't return the gaze. Couldn't rewind what I'd done. But it could. Because that was the other thing I realized. That sentence on the second tape, "He who watches is watched," it wasn't a warning. It was a rule. I decided I needed proof. Something I could show someone. Anything to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. So after 2 days of no sleep and no new messages, I did something I swore I wouldn't do. I went back to the store. The closed sign was still flipped. The door was still open a crack. Inside, everything was exactly as I left it. Except the TV was back on. And the sixth tape, the one I'd tried to destroy, the one that reappeared, was playing by itself. I stepped closer. This time, the footage wasn't a hallway. It was the store. Maplewood Video. Same layout. Same lighting. Same shelves. But it was from a high corner angle, like a security camera I knew didn't exist. And sitting behind the counter, slumped, unmoving, was me. Same clothes. Same posture. My doppelganger on the screen was staring at the front door, eyes hollow, mouth slightly open like I'd been frozen mid-breath. I moved around the counter, hoping the tape would glitch or jump or do anything to break the illusion. But my copy stayed still. Until I moved. Then it moved too. Exactly the same. Slight head tilt. Hand to the chest. Step back. I waved. It waved. My legs almost gave out. I leaned against the counter and stared at myself on the screen. Then the image flickered, and a second figure appeared behind me in the frame. The tall thing. Just standing there. Right behind my screen self. But when I turned around in the real store, nothing. I looked back at the screen. Now it was closer to my double. I turned around again, empty. Back to the screen, closer still. One step behind him now. Reaching out. Then the screen went black. And the last thing it showed, in slow fading red text. Rewind to stay ahead. The tape clicked. Ejected. Dead silence. I didn't know what it meant then. But I would. Soon. I left the store without even taking the tape. Didn't turn off the TV, didn't lock the door. Just walked out like it was burning down behind me, though the fire was only in my chest. My nerves felt like frayed wires. I was shaking so bad I could barely get my keys into the ignition. All I kept thinking about was that last line. Rewind to stay ahead. What the hell did it mean? I went home and pulled out my old VCR from the closet, one I hadn't touched in years, and hooked it up to the little TV in my bedroom. If I was going to figure this out, I had to do it on my terms. So I went back to the beginning. I dug into my bag and pulled out the first tape, the one I'd kept, the one with the figure sitting in the chair. I popped it in, fast-forwarded until the figure appeared, then rewound it slowly. That's when something strange happened. At about the 15-minute mark, when I hit rewind, the tape started showing something different. Not in reverse. Not the same footage played backward. New footage. A different room. This one looked like an old living room. Maybe late 80s, paneled walls, brown carpet, a TV on a wheeled cart just like the one at the store. There was a couch, an empty recliner, and a man standing near the window. Face turned away. He was watching something outside. Then he slowly turned, like he sensed the camera, and I got a clear look at his face. And my blood ran cold. Because I recognized him. It was Mr. Whalen, one of our regulars. Older guy. Nice enough. Always rented the same 3 movies, The Thing, Blade Runner, The Conversation. He hadn't been in for a while. I figured he'd finally given up on VHS. But there he was. On the tape. Looking right into the camera. Then his mouth moved. Just slightly. Like he was whispering something. I cranked the volume. Nothing. But as I leaned in, lip reading as best I could, I realized what he was saying. Just 3 words. It finds you. Then the image distorted, tracking lines shredded the screen, and the footage cut back to static. I stopped the tape. Just sat there, staring at the blue screen, heart pounding in my throat. I had watched past the intended frame. Past what it wanted me to see. And it had shown me a victim. Or maybe a warning. I didn't sleep that night. Just kept thinking about Whalen. Wondering if he'd watched one too many tapes. Wondering if he'd tried to rewind. If maybe he'd failed. The next day, I called his number. It rang 6 times, then a mechanical voice told me the line had been disconnected. I drove by his house. There was tape across the door. The real kind, yellow crime scene tape. 2 police notices stuck to the window. Unreadable from my car. The curtains were drawn. No sign of life. I thought about going to the cops. But what would I say? Hey, I think an unmarked VHS tape might have killed an old man. Or erased him. Instead, I went back to the store. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. Because the rules were changing, and I needed answers before my tape ran out. And when I got there, I found something waiting on the counter. Not a tape this time. Not a note. But a photograph. Black and white. Grainy. It showed me, sitting behind the counter. Alone. Except for the tall, thin figure standing behind me, half in shadow. Its hand was on my shoulder. I dropped the photo. Actually dropped it. It fluttered to the floor like it weighed nothing, but it felt like a brick had hit my chest. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't want to pick it up. I didn't want to touch it again. That hand on my shoulder, it wasn't just a visual trick. Even looking at it, I could feel it again. The pressure. Cold and heavy, like something that didn't belong in this world was anchoring itself to me. I looked up, scanning the store. Every shadow felt wrong. Every shape between the shelves looked like it might move if I blinked too slow. But nothing happened. Not yet. I picked up the photo and turned it over. There was something written on the back, in that same thick sharp as before. Tapes bleed. People fade. I didn't even know what that meant. But it felt like something was coming apart. The line between the tapes and reality wasn't holding anymore. Whatever had been contained in the reels, in the screens, in the security footage angles, was leaking. Bleeding. And I was caught in it. I went into the back room and grabbed the box of tapes. There were only 4 left now. 4 I hadn't watched. The rest were either gone or had been returned on their own terms. I didn't even know what was real anymore. If I'd thrown them out or they'd found their way back, or if they'd never left. I took the 3rd one. The middle child. The hinge point. I slid it into the VCR. No hesitation this time. I knew I was past the point of safety. There was no unseeing, no hiding. This was a burning fuse, and I was holding the match. The screen flickered to life. Black and white again. Grainy. A kitchen this time. Outdated wallpaper, rotary phone on the wall, dishes piled in the sink. A man and a woman sat at a table. Neither spoke. Their faces had been blurred. Not like censored on purpose. More like the tape had degraded in just those spots. Like the medium itself refused to hold on to their features. They sat there, frozen, until the woman suddenly stood up and walked off frame. The man stayed still. Then, after what felt like forever, he turned toward the camera. Or at least where it would be. His face never came into focus. But he raised one hand and pointed straight at me. And I swear to you, the screen glitched, and for a single frame, I saw myself sitting at my TV. Same shirt. Same posture. Just a frame. Gone in an instant. Then another line of text faded in. IT can tape over you. I hit stop. Ejected the tape. Sat there in the dark with my thoughts folding in on themselves. I was starting to understand. It wasn't just that the tapes showed things. They were recording too. Watching. Looping. And as soon as you watched them, they started copying you. Frame by frame. Until... What? Until you weren't you anymore? Until you were just another piece of footage? I thought of Mr. Whalen. I thought of the man in the kitchen, the blurred face, the pointing hand. How many others had watched? How many were still in there? Then I noticed something. The TV screen hadn't turned off after I ejected the tape. It was still on. Still showing the store. Live footage. Wide angle. From the corner of the ceiling. And in the middle of the frame, I was standing there, staring at myself on the screen. And behind me, there were 3 tall figures now. Not 1. Not 2. 3. All standing still. All facing me. Their heads slowly tilting. In sync. As if waiting for me to do one last thing. I turned around. Nothing. Just the aisles silent and still. Same musty smell of old carpet and sun-faded cardboard. No tall figures. No movement. But the screen didn't lie. I turned back toward the CRT, and they were still there, the 3 of them, standing behind me in the footage, closer now. A few feet from my shoulder. They weren't shapes anymore. They had form. Texture. Their skin looked warped. Like film left in the sun too long. Bubbled. Ripped in places, exposing raw static underneath. And their heads. God, their heads moved like broken servos. A slow tick, tick, tick motion, like an old tape trying to rewind through damaged reels. The image began to glitch. The camera shook. Then a new message appeared, blinking in the corner of the screen, typed out character by character. Recording in progress. I stumbled backward. The screen flickered again, showing a timestamp in the corner now. 11:52 p.m., October 31st. Halloween. The moment the final tape had demanded I watch it. It had always been counting down. Not to a scare or a climax, but to a transfer. It wasn't just about watching. It was about being watched, copied, erased. Because I wasn't the viewer anymore. I was the subject. I tried pulling the plug, ripping the TV off the cart, but nothing happened. The power cord was already out of the wall, but the screen still hummed. Still glowed. Still showed me, losing resolution. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. But not like before. They were blurring. Slightly. The edges of my fingers weren't sharp. Like the color was draining out. Like I was becoming low definition. And the static in my ears, quiet at first, was now building. Louder and louder, like wind inside a tunnel. I grabbed the last tape, the one labeled "Play Me" midnight, and looked at the slot. It was 11:59. 1 minute left. My breath was ragged. Chest tight. If I didn't watch it, would it finish the recording anyway? If I did, would it trap me inside? I sat down. I don't know why. Maybe because I already knew it was over. Or maybe because a part of me still wanted to understand. I slid the tape in. The screen stayed black. And then, for the last time, the white text appeared. Not typed. Spoken. A dry, rasping voice like dead leaves caught in a tape deck. "You are now part of the library." Then came the images. Flickering fast. Waylon. The man from the kitchen. The woman who walked out of frame. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of people. All facing the camera. All standing silently. Until, frame by frame, their heads tilted toward me. That's when I understood. These weren't tapes anymore. They were reels of people. People who watched, who shouldn't have, who got watched in return. And me? I was just the next shelf. The screen went black. The VCR clicked. The tape ejected itself one last time. Cold. Silent. And when I looked at my reflection in the black screen, I wasn't sure what I saw. Not entirely. My eyes didn't track quite right. There was a second me, just behind my shoulder. Head tilted. Waiting for the next watcher.